Today, I have a very special guest, and it is Jim Thomas,
Yep.
and the city manager of Kingfisher, in case you don't recognize him. And you've had a long career in this field, and you say you grew up in Maine.
Grew up in Lewiston, Maine. My father was in the military, and we traveled a lot. He was born in the Mississippi Delta in northern Mississippi, and so he married a Yankee from Lewiston, and we had quite an adventure over 22 years.
And you ended up in Germany for a while? And
spent some time in Germany. My father was in the Air Force. We were stationed at Ramstein Air Force Base. Had an opportunity in 1973 to go to Berlin and see the wall.
So you saw the wall while it was a wall.
It was. And when President Reagan told Mr. Gorbachev tear down that wall, it had an emotional effect on me. And then when I eventually saw the wall come down, there were tears in my eyes because I knew the sacrifices that the people in East Germany had given for that freedom that was eventually given to them.
Wow. And then, so now you ended up at the University of Utah, or in Utah?
I was in Utah.
Went to a university in Utah.
That's correct.
Yes.
Weber State University.
Okay.
And got my bachelor's degree in political science and communications. And then I would go on to Brigham Young University and get my master's in public administration.
And then your first political position was your hometown.
My hometown, my wife and I was working for the Air Force as a private citizen. I was a Department of Defense employee. And we bought our first home. It was 980 square feet, 2 bedrooms, nice, quiet subdivision. And the city council wanted to put a mobile home park in our backyard. And myself and some of my neighbors went to City Hall and said, this is wrong, this is spot zoning. And what little exposure I had to politics, I said, I'm not going to tolerate this. And my neighbor said, Jim, let's run you for the city council. And so I said, boy, I wasn't born and raised here in Roy, Utah, but I have a stake in this community. I want to raise my family here. And so I went out and I knocked on 5,000 doors, wore out 2 pairs of shoes, and was elected to the city council at the age of 25.
Wow. And you were one of the youngest ever.
I was the youngest at the time to serve as an elected official in Weber County. Ironically, the night of the election, I was feeling boastful and full of myself, and the newspaper reporter came up to me and says, Jim, how do you feel? And I said, we're going to elect someone tonight that's not a grandfather. And I defeated a 62-year-old grandfather, and that was the headline the next day. And the mayor and city council for the next 4 years chided me, and the public chided me that I wasn't a grandfather, but thoroughly enjoyed getting introduced to politics at an early age, and that's what would lead to me to get into public management full time.
And then you went on to, you said Chicago next after that?
I left Roy. I served 7 years on the city council, and I spent 2 years as a city manager. Went on to Forest Park, right outside Chicago. Learned a lot about labor negotiations.
That's a very big car manufacturing area.
It is.
Park, yeah.
It is very blue collar. Chicago is kind of that place where everybody looks to. If what they're doing in Chicago, we should be doing in the suburbs. And so I brought a different perspective, and it was quite a learning experience to deal with unions. Utah was a right-to-work state. We didn't have any unions there, and so this was an eye-opener for me.
I think you were telling me that in school they taught you how to negotiate with unions, but that wasn't how it really
They told
worked.
you the technical things, and we had 5 unions in Forest Park, and I would say after the first couple bargaining sessions at the table, I took my labor relations class and I threw the book out the window, and I had to learn through the School of Hard Knocks. And over my career, I've settled over 40 labor agreements, and so I've learned a lot over those 30 years and how to deal with labor management issues. Whitefish Bay was a great community, very affluent, just north of Milwaukee. The business leaders of Milwaukee live in Whitefish Bay. I had a 7-member council. 6 of them were attorneys. It was challenging at times. They all wanted to give closing statements. Our council meetings were very long. And as I said, it was an affluent community. The police chief and myself were the only 2 city employees that could afford to live in Whitefish Bay. Wow. But here again, it added to that mixture and culture of working with different kinds of people. But I enjoyed White. Beautiful community right on Lake Michigan, very patriotic, but very, very affluent. And affluent people think differently than the average blue collar that I'd come from in Forest Park.
And then you went back home again, back to Maine.
I went back to Maine, which was an interesting experience because Mainers are real sensitive about outsiders. And I went to work for a community in Old Orchard Beach, a very tourist community, permanent population of about 10,000. But in the summertime, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, it'll get as high as 70,000. What helped me there was when people found out I was born in Lewiston, well, you're a Mainer. Even though I was educated in Utah, I've traveled around, been to Europe, you know. Once they knew that my grandfather worked in one of the mills in Lewiston, was a labor leader there, you're one of us, you know. And so I was well accepted very, very quickly in Old Orchard Beach and thoroughly enjoyed the people there.
You were telling me that the way you described that position, it sounded like the movie Jaws, where on the 4th of July, the town swelled to way over
60, 70,000.
Wow. And what was the original population?
The original population is about 10. And so trying to manage that, you know, with reserve police officers, we hired 50 reserve police officers every summer to manage the beach. We had about 3 miles of beach. And I had to get my public works crews out there at 5 in the morning to clean the beach. Because when you have that many tourists, they want white sandy beaches. And so we were constantly picking up trash, raking the seaweed, just another cultural change than what I was used to, but thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed pier fries and the magic of Old Orchard Beach.
So I think when I first met you, I mentioned that I was brought up in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and that's where one of your most memorable positions was in West Warwick, Rhode Island. I would
leave Old Orchard Beach, and my wife was working for the federal government. She was working in Boston, and we wanted to move a little closer to her employment. And so we left Old Orchard, went to West Warwick. This is a community that had a very tragic
station
fire that had weaved through the court for a number of years, and I just happened to be there at the right time, at the right place.
So you came in after the fact?
After the fire.
You inherited.
I inherited the mess that tragic event left a scar on West Warwick.
So then you moved out west.
Moved out west to Claremore, Oklahoma.
Yep.
Home to Will Rogers, a man that I have always had a great affection for and love.
He has some really cool plaques in his office of Will Rogers.
Will Rogers. I'd always believed Will Rogers' main philosophy was, I never met a man I didn't like. And, you know, when you dig deeper under that, here was a man that could work with presidents of the United States, kings and princesses and monarchs around the world, and yet he could relate to the average guy on the street. And I took that as my mantra in public service, that as I dealt with governors in various states, United States senators or congressmen or the legislature, I said, I want to be able to relate to them and talk to them on their level and respect them for their office, but I also want to be able to relate to the sanitation worker and the guys that are dealing in the trenches. And I think it has served my 30 years in public service well. Then I retired. I spent 30 years in public service. City management is a very stressful profession. In that 8 years in Claremore, I dealt with 19 different elected officials. The council, the 9-member board that hired me 8 years earlier, the only one left was the mayor. And so I just felt like the timing was right for me to step aside. My blood pressure was high. My doctor was concerned that I might have a heart attack. And so I took 3 years and kind of wandered in the wilderness, I guess. Went to see my grandchildren that are spread out all over the United States, and went to Jerusalem. I wouldn't go there today, but I spent 10 days in Jerusalem touring, seeing where the Savior had walked. Sea of Galilee. I took a boat across the Sea of Galilee, and went to Rome to see why the Romans failed. They still have roads still
today. The roads
today.
are better than ours, though.
The roads are better than ours, and they're still standing today.
Yeah.
And so we came back from that 15-day rendezvous, and I told my wife, I said, I'm ready to go back to work. And she
What
said,
were you
really?
thinking?
That's what she said. She said, you're not enjoying, retirement? I said, we've traveled, I've cut wood, I went bow hunting for 3 weeks last year, I said, I've done all the things. I bought a tractor, small ranch, but I said, I'm ready to go back to work. And so I knew Dave Zielinski, the previous manager in Kingfisher. He and I had worked together. I was the president of our state association, the City Managers Association of Oklahoma. And he followed me as he was my vice president. And he always talked highly of Kingfisher. And so I put my resume in and had a great interview with the mayor and the commissioners. And I've been here 4 months now and looking forward to, the future.
So what are your top 3 goals for Kingfisher? I know the electricity thing is a big one.
The electricity thing is a big one. We do have smart meters, but they're not operating at an optimum level for our water and electric. And so we're going to address that. I think the other thing that, for whatever reason, and I'm still trying to figure out why Kingfisher hasn't made economic development a priority.
You're
And when
saying
I say
there's like 1% growth?
1% growth, I looked at the census going all the way back to 1920. 1920, the population was about 2,500. And in 2023, the latest census I saw, we're at about 4,800. So that's less than 1% growth over 103 years. Now, I don't know if that's the community wanted to grow that slow, or the community just never made it a priority to build homes, bring industries, or they were just dependent upon oil. You were definitely very oil rich out here on the western part of Oklahoma. So I'm going to look at the electric water situation, the economic development, and then I want to develop a strategic plan, something that the next manager can pick up and just carry forward, and build on the traditions that those that came before them. Dave Zielinski was here for over 10 years. I'm going to stand on his shoulders and build on what he established. Kingfisher is a unique community. There's a lot of wealth, but there's also some poverty. And I want to be able to balance those two. And hopefully, as Will Rogers said, I never met a person I didn't like. I'm hoping that I could help Kingfisher reach that ultimate goal.
Pretty soon, there's a chamber event coming up.
There is. On the 15th of November, the chamber is promoting Meet the Manager. I'm going to introduce myself. We've sent postcards out and advertisements to about 260 businesses in Kingfisher. And I truly hope the business or the community leaders come out and meet me one-on-one. I don't mind sharing a little bit of history, maybe going into a little more depth of some of my life's experiences and my travels. But I really want it to be a listening session. I want to hear from the business community. I want to know, why has our growth only been at 1%? Why don't we have more businesses, more diversity in businesses? And what can we do as a city? What are we doing right? And what are we doing wrong? Or where can we improve? I've never been one to be a status quo city manager. I told my staff when I first got there, I said, if you think they got an old retired guy who's going to put his feet on the desk and watch the grass grow, you're only fooling yourself.
Wrong guy.
You're a wrong guy. I said, I hold people accountable, just like the mayor and the commissioners are going to hold me accountable for my tenure here. And so I'm going to give you the tools to be successful. I want people to be successful. And I want Kingfisher to continue to grow and be the best that it can be.
Wow. So November 15th, where's it going to be?
It's going to be at the county arena.
Oh, fairgrounds.
Fairgrounds, there
Yes,
you go.
the big
the
fairgrounds building. So
Yeah.
there'll be plenty of room for everyone to come and meet Jim.
Yep.
Ask your hard questions, and I think that'll be a good event to really dive into. Meet a lot of people that could make a difference.
If I could summarize Jim Thomas, it's a new day in Kingfisher. We have a bright future, and I want the citizens, I want the business community, I want the elected leadership to be part of that future in this new day.
Wow. Thank you, Jim.
You betcha.
All right.
It was a real pleasure.
Stay tuned.